Invincible Ultimate Collection, Volume 1. This is my first time reading the Invincible comic, so this is all new to me, and I don't know where this story is going, or I don't know very much about this franchise at all. So if you're a fan of this comic, you're going to have to forgive me. I'm not going to be able to talk about this very intelligently. But as always, feel free to leave comments correcting me or letting me know where I went wrong or letting me know what to expect if I continue with it, etc. I never really heard of this comic until maybe a year or two ago when I started seeing clips from the animated show on YouTube. So I guess a few years ago, Amazon Prime bought the rights to this and started producing an animated show. And clips of this started popping up on YouTube, at least on my YouTube page. And I guess maybe this is a sign that I spend too much time on YouTube. But I started getting vaguely curious and clicking on a few of those clips. Nothing that was more than a few seconds long. But the impression I got was that Invincible was kind of like The Boys. It was another kind of dark humor show about a bunch of superheroes who had kind of gone bad. And I wasn't really that interested in it. But then, when I was wandering around Book Street here in Saigon, I found this volume at one of the used book stalls for only 380,000 Vietnamese dong, a bit of a bargain. And so I decided, why not? And, you know, it was in good condition, so a bargain to pick up at a used bookstore. Now, yeah, like I said, I never heard of this before I started seeing clips from the animated show on YouTube. Apparently this started to come out in 2003, at which point I was already living abroad, which may have been one of the reasons I never heard about this. I also was not a huge fan of Image Comics, which is the publisher that publishes these. So yeah, here we go, Image here. I mean, I remember them from the 90s when they, I think this is acknowledged in the foreword here. Yeah, in 1992 they made some waves, and I remember kids at summer camp having some of these Image comics. But I never got interested in them. I was more interested in Marvel and DC because those superheroes had more history to them, more lore that you could get into. I wasn't interested in the new stuff so much. And then, like I said, when this was coming out, I was already abroad. So those of you who have been living in the U.S. for the past 20 years will have to tell me, how popular has this comic been? How popular was it before the Amazon Prime cartoon came out? Did it have a large following? I get the impression that maybe it did, and that maybe I've just been oblivious to it, again, partly by living abroad for so many years. Certainly the publisher's introduction is not shy about singing its praises. So Invincible is the best superhero comic book in the universe, which means Robert Kirkman is the best superhero comic book writer, Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley are the best superhero comic book artists, etc. The book is full of its own lore, and it's got a lot of extras in the back talking about the original covers and the original artwork and stuff like that, and it's making this book sound like it's a really big deal. I got caught up in this, and I know I shouldn't, because this is by the publisher, so of course they're going to say the stuff we publish is the absolute best. But I was noticing that this was in a big bound volume. They were talking about how well received this series had been. I was thinking, okay, there's a cartoon which is on Amazon Prime, which is seems to be somewhat popular. Maybe I've just missed out on a really good comic that's been really popular. And went into this with high expectations because of that mindset. And those high expectations can cut both ways. On the one hand, at least for me, if I've got high expectations for something, I'm prone to convincing myself that it's better than it really is. Like I'm looking for everything and I'm not trying to find flaws in it. I'm looking and trying to figure out how great it is, and I get caught up by the critics very easily like that. But on the other hand, when I start to see flaws in it, then I'm very quick to be hypercritical of those flaws. Like, oh, I thought this was the best thing ever, and here are some flaws in it. What's going on? Type attitude. And in my opinion, this story has some flaws in it. And we'll get to those maybe as I go through this review. But on the whole, I did find this entertaining. So, relatively entertaining. So, the original publisher's price is $39.99, which is a fair chunk of change. Of course, that's what comic books go for these days, especially a hardcover. So, in terms of the binding and the ink and stuff like that, it's not surprising. These full color pages. And it seems to be high quality paper as well. The story, though, I'm not sure if the story is worth $39.99, but if you happen to see this at a bargain bin or at a used bookstore, if a friend has a copy you could borrow, or a library or something like that, I found it entertaining while I was reading it. Now, one thing that I often do when I have comic books, and actually you can see I'm somewhat doing it right now absent-mindedly, is flip through it, because it's so easy to just flip through and get previews of the story. But I tried to resist doing that with this book, because I got some inkling that there were a few twists and turns ahead, and I wanted to try and enjoy it unspoiled as much as possible. And I think that's the right way to read this, because there are a few twists and turns ahead. Some of them earned, some of them maybe not quite earned. I'll get around to talking about my criticisms of the plot as we go. But it may be, spoilers ahead. If you haven't read this book yet, you'll probably enjoy it best unspoiled. And I'm going to spoil stuff by talking about the plot, so be forewarned. But before I get into the plot, maybe it's just worth talking about the pictures here. This is a nice big volume. I mean, you can see, here's my hand and here's the book in comparison to that. And the art is quite big, and you get a chance to see everything. I was reading Astro Boy right before reading this. And this was on my shelves at the time I was reading Astro Boy, and I couldn't help but compare it. Because, I mean, the Astro Boy, and in fact, I mentioned this comparison when I was doing my review of the Astro Boy Omnibus. These are comics which were originally published in a magazine back in the 50s and 60s, but are now being republished in this format, where all these detailed pictures are now just scrunched into these tiny pages here, which makes it a little bit hard to appreciate the detail of this art in some of these panels. And while I was reading this, I was comparing this with these pages here, in which you had very big spreads with often, dare I say it, somewhat unimpressive art. Let me see if I can find a good example here. Some pages are better than others for illustrating this, but look at this. Look at this. We've got all this space, this huge book, and this is what we're treated to. And then we turn the page, and we get more of this. And, you know, I was comparing this with the detailed pictures of Tezuka Osamu smushed into these tiny pages. And I was thinking, oh, it's not fair. There's no justice. Why is this so big and this so small? But I shouldn't take it out on Invincible, because the people I really want to blame are the publishers of the Astro Boy Omnibus, who should have made their book bigger. The fact that the publishers of Invincible have so lovingly given their artwork so much space to be big and easy on the eye is not their fault. So this one is doing it right in terms of making this artwork very big. Unless, of course, shelf space is an issue for you. In which case, I mean, this is a big book. Look at this. And this is volume 1. I think there are 12 volumes telling the whole story. Volume 1 was the only one I found at the used bookstore. But, you know, you want to get all 12 of these. You're going to have to clear out a whole shelf to hold this. Plus, only this much of it is story. All this part here is extras. And one gets the impression that maybe these extras are just here to pad out the pages because they didn't want to give you another issue. You've got to buy volume 2 to get the next issue. And not only does one get that impression, but they go ahead and say it directly. So, still flipping through the extras. They have the script here, the Invincible 1 script. And it says, as an added bonus, or just to fill up pages, you know how it is. We present the full script for the first issue. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know why we got so much extras here when we could have just gotten an extra issue. So this is issues 1 to 13 of the comic. I think it could have easily been 1 to 14, maybe even 1 to 15. Look at how much space is filled up. All this red stuff is just the extras at the end. And as I indicated in those panels I was showing you earlier of the boy sleeping, here's another great example. A fair amount of this artwork is repetitive. So we see the exact same artwork here. The thought balloons are changing. But sometimes there's not even that. I mean, here, look. Nothing's changing until we get and then we got so here, and then we get the dialogue here. Now, I guess to be fair to the publishers, the artist and the writer and stuff like that, they know they're doing this. And in fact, they put what's that expression? Put a headlight on it, shine a headlight on it, put a lamppost on it. There's some sort of writerly expression about deliberately drawing a reader's attention to the flaws so that you can criticize it first. He's meeting his comic book idol here. This is his comic book idol within the book. And he talks about how he's amazed that the work is never late. And the comic book idol says, actually, a lot of times I'll just reuse art that I've already done over and over. It's good for dramatic pauses and when stuff doesn't really change much from panel to panel. Most people don't even notice. And then, don't you think that's kind of cheap? Not really. So, drawing attention to it by making a joke out of it. That most people don't even notice bit, though. I don't know if that's part of the joke or not, but I'm going to quibble with that. I was noticing this long before I got to this point where the writers and the artists were making fun of themselves. So it's yeah. I'm not saying I wanted a smaller book, but it's a bit ironic that we've got this big, huge book and then filling it up with these panels, which are, well, they're not always Jack Kirby. You know, the art on this is not always as epic as it could be. Now, granted, I've been cherry picking by showing you some of the worst ones here. There are some scenes here where there is more going on. But anyways, all that out of the way, I should finally talk about the plot of this thing. So the plot is, at least the initial setup, is that there's a kid in high school whose father is kind of an alien Superman, and who finally gets his powers kicked in. So he goes to throw the garbage away. He sees that the garbage is flying into the sky, and he remarks, "It's about time." So he finally gets his superpowers. And then once he gets his superpowers, he decides to immediately go out fighting crime. Now, I guess maybe here's my first quibble with the storytelling element of this. I think in these books, you have to give them their initial premise. So I know aliens and superpowers are completely unrealistic, but we'll go with that. That's the premise. But then, having given it that premise, he still needs to learn how to fight, right? I mean, there's no indication that he's been doing any training to develop this athleticism. He's been living a normal high school life, and he's been working at a fast food place. And I understand that he's inherited his Superman-like powers from his dad. But he just jumps, I mean, you've got to get some practice to throw a punch like that, right? To do flips like that. Okay, but I guess we have to give that space as well. He jumps into crime fighting with his dad. And then he very quickly meets up with some other teenage superheroes. And then realizes later that, let me see if I can find the right panel. One of them is his classmate at school. So, oh, sorry, I missed the panel where he figured it out. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is somebody he's seen when he was out superheroing, and then he sees her at school, and they are leading a double life. Secret superheroes at night. Our ordinary high school classmates at school during the day, and there's some high school drama being caused by the fact that they're seen eating together in the school cafeteria, especially since she's really gorgeous and he is, well, I guess he's good looking, but he's being portrayed as kind of a nerd. So the teacher chews them out for being lovebirds, but because they're talking in the class about their superheroing, or whispering, I guess. And then he has to say, "She's not my girlfriend. In fact, she's dating somebody else, another teenage superhero." So there's an element of teenage high school angst to make it more interesting. Now, I personally, my high school days are a long time behind me. I'm well into middle age at this point in my life, but I vividly remember the emotions of high school. And I suspect that's true for everyone, right? No matter how old you get, there's still a part of you that feels like the nervousness and the tension and the angst and the uncertainty and the drama of high school was just yesterday. I was a nerd when I was in high school. I even remember having an elaborate fantasy about how, even though I was a nerd at school, maybe I'd envisioned what if I was really a superhero after school got out and nobody knew about it. And then maybe there was a pretty girl in my class who turned out also to be a superhero. And I mean, it's a fairly common adolescent fantasy. I'm somewhat embarrassed to say it, but it's a fairly common one, isn't it? So this is just tapping directly into that teenage fantasy, and I was totally there for it. I made me remember exactly how I felt when I was in high school. It's also, of course, this is not the first writer to do this. And there's an element in here that's similar to Spider-Man, right? Especially as we find out later that high school teacher who humiliated him turned out later to be, let me see if I can find the panel, one of the villains. Oh yeah, here we go. So they confront him, and he turns out to be the villain who's been kidnapping kids from his class and making them into human bombs. So it's not like his high school life and his superheroing life are separated. There's a bit of the drama of it is intertwined. Which, of course, brings to mind comic books like Spider-Man. In Spider-Man's world, also his roommate was the son of the supervillain, and then one of his professors turned out to be one of his the supervillains, there was all this drama mixed in with his college life. But I think in the case of Spider-Man, people sometimes forget this, but it wasn't until he actually graduated high school and went to college, and I think maybe coinciding with the departure of Steve Ditko at that time, that's when his kind of social life got intertwined with his superhero life. Was when Spider-Man was in college. But when Spider-Man was in high school, he had a largely different set of friends who were not connected with his superheroing life. But of course, when they do a Spider-Man movie or something nowadays, they try and recreate that element starting all the way back in high school. Sorry, that was a bit of a long digression, but what I mean to say is this is kind of like Spider-Man in high school as we like to remember it. Maybe not as it actually was, because in the actual comics it didn't kick off until Spider-Man was in college. Sorry about that. Sometimes doing these unscripted, I tend to go off on tangents. Okay, but anyways, where we get the twist is starting in the Guardians of the Globe, issue 7. It turns out his dad, who has been the Superman-type character, is actually a super villain. He's been masquerading as a hero this time, but he's actually a villain. And he completely kills all the Guardians of the Globe, who are the Justice League. And the Guardians of the Globe are very unapologetically just stand-ins for the DC superheroes. So Wonder Woman, Batman, Aquaman, Flash, Martian Manhunter, etc. And in the extras at the back, the writer says, yeah, I kind of had to do that because I needed to establish them, but I didn't have a lot of space to establish them. So we just ripped off the DC Justice League. Which, maybe brings me to another... Actually, come back to that maybe if I have time. So we need to talk about this twist here, which is, turns out his father is actually a supervillain who is an alien from another planet who's been sent to Earth to secretly take it over. Okay, so the twist that his father was secretly a villain this whole time, maybe that's a good twist. I don't know. It seems to come out of nowhere because the character that's been established in these 7 issues leading up to this seems to be a good person with good values. But, I guess that's why they call it a twist. But then, here's where it really lost me, because he's got this ridiculous story about how he's from an alien race and he's been sent to infiltrate Earth with the idea of weakening it and somewhat taking it over. This is a reverse of the story he had told earlier. It's just completely... it's a plan that really doesn't make any sense. But then, after having told this to his son, he tells his son that his son has to join him in taking over with the aliens. And, of course, his son rejects that because, because of course. So, his son knows nothing about this alien planet. His son has grown up on Earth. His son doesn't have any loyalty to this alien planet that his father's from. And now his father is telling him that you have to join me on this. I mean, surely his father must be more intelligent than that to expect his son to just accept that all of a sudden and then join him on that. And then they have this huge big fight in which, I guess as is common in these superhero comic books, there's tons of collateral damage. Look at all these buildings being collapsed all around them. And you don't see the dead bodies, but there must be tons of casualties related to this. Now, what's weird about... I know these big knockdown fights in the middle of the city are just kind of a staple of the genre. But neither character seems to care. Omni-Man isn't making any effort to hide what he's doing after all these years of, carefully infiltrating Earth. His son, who's supposed to be the good guy and is standing up for Earth, just has no interest in avoiding any of the collateral damage here. He's fighting his father in the big city just as much as his father is fighting him. There's just a whole bunch of notes here that aren't making any sense. Then we find out later that the government operative who's supposed to be controlling his father, or not controlling, but who's supposed to act as the liaison between the government and his father, heard the whole thing because of his father's earpiece. Allows him to hear everything. So, this seems to be really sloppy work from a guy who's supposed to be having infiltrated Earth for 20 years and just all of a sudden blows his cover like that. Now, I don't know how the series is going to go on, but it never lost me completely. It was still relatively entertaining to keep flicking the stories. But at this point, I completely lost the illusion that this was the best comic book ever. It's okay. But this kind of sloppy storytelling is going to knock this down for me to not quite the best superhero comic book in the universe. Now, who knows? There's I'm out of time. I'm gonna have to finish here. So, thank you very much.